I guess for me, I'm looking at actions, right? So as someone who supported a lot of progressive candidates that went into office, as someone who a lot of us canvassed for those candidates, a lot of us donated money to them. And to see people not support someone like Jessica Cisneros, who was pro-choice, and choosing to endorse Henry Cuellar, it's the actions. It's those types of actions that people see. And it says to us, like, well, maybe you really don't care because you endorsed Henry Cuellar instead of his opponent, who was who was pro-choice.
I understand people's frustration. I do think that blowing out one endorsement, I respect that, but shouldn't be the limits. As I made endorsements over my 6 years in Congress that I'm sure people don't agree with. But I think ultimately we should be judged on our policy. And here the House did vote to codify Roe versus Wade clearly, strongly. And I think where we need to focus is on the Senate, and we should focus on the president and doing more. I mean, two concrete things the president can do: tell the FDA that the FDA should be providing medical abortion, and that we'll be providing those pills to every state. Have federal clinics that on lands and states where abortion has been made illegal to be providing abortion, and make it clear that federal law preempts state law. You can't arrest someone who's going on that federal land. So those are, I think, what we have to do is figure out how do we move forward constructively to protect women's rights. And obviously, people can judge any individual candidate based on the endorsements they make and factor that in and whether they want to support them. But right now, the urgency is what can we get done in terms of the agenda.
So I've been telling people that I feel that abortion is it's healthcare. It's a part of healthcare for women. I do have to ask in reference to healthcare in this country, because a lot of the squad members ran on Medicare for all. We had marches in this country last year in over 50 cities for Medicare for all. There's another march this Saturday that's going to be in DC, the Medicare for All March. And I have to tell you, I have been greatly disappointed to see that some of the same politicians that ran on that issue chose not only to not attend those marches, but not even to tweet about it. Cori Bush was the only one that came. And as an organizer, like, it's really frustrating when you hear politicians tell you to organize on the outside, and we're organizing on those issues that they ran on, and they're not showing up. So at this point, some of us are asking, like, why should we even support them going forward?
Well, I'm a strong supporter of Medicare for all. I think we have to be bold in having hearings on it and supporting Bernie Sanders' bill. It's good for America. I mean, it's good for our businesses. It's good for manufacturing. It's necessary, if ever, in a pandemic. I mean, the stories you hear of people still getting stuck with bills and debt for going to the hospital, for getting health care are outrageous. And we ought to cancel medical debt in this country. Now, I think we need a better system of making sure those of us who are strongly pro-Medicare for all are aware of the activism and the marches. And I'd be happy to show up in the future, especially if they're in my district or in Washington, to those kind of marches. I met with a group, Medicare for All group, that is doing great work, and they wanted me to work on canceling medical debt. And I reached out to Senator Sanders. We're working on a bill to cancel that, about $290 billion of medical debt. But I am all for continuing to build and organize on that, and just need to figure out how do we get a better sense of communication so we know about the marches and can show up.
Well, I can tell you, I contacted multiple politicians, like offices. A lot of us did, and we were given the same story. At least I did for my state, for Massachusetts. I can't speak for your state, California, but we were given the same stories that, okay, we'll pass this message along. And then we never heard anything back. And I know that people can't be there all the time at every event. I totally get it. But I feel like they could have at least tweeted about it in some type of
Was the march in DC?
Yeah, there was one in DC last year, and there's one in DC this Saturday.
This past Saturday?
This Saturday coming up, July 30th.
Yeah, but the challenge also is that the Saturday Congress is out of session. So I think when they do these marches, and we're back in our district. So I think they have to pick a date also that members of Congress, or during votes, or when Congress is in session. Because a lot of times then when Congress is not in session, on a weekend or in August, then members should be going back home, and so they come back home to our districts. But I am for these marches, and I would be delighted and happy to participate, and certainly to tweet out about anything that supports Medicare for all.
I have to ask in reference to force the vote. Like during a pandemic, we were asking progressive politicians to force the vote for Medicare for all. Not one member of Congress was willing to do it. And I have to say, like, it's been a great disappointment, because how could you not? What is the right time? And we've been hearing this a lot, like now's not the right time. But during a pandemic, if you won't force the vote for Medicare for all, then when is it going to happen? So this is something I think that I'll be honest with you. A lot of us have left the Democratic Party. A lot of us are not supporting this movement anymore, because we feel like at the end of the day, some of the politicians have decided it's more important to focus on their career and not focus on the issues that they said they were going to fight for. We just don't see them fighting. At least one of them could have came to the Force the Vote town hall. They made no appearance, and they knew about it. So it's really frustrating. Like, I hear politicians saying they support Medicare for all, but I don't see them fighting for it.
Well, we have made progress. We had 2 hearings on Medicare for all since I've been in Congress this term. I agree with you, we should have a vote on it. But the reality is that, well, Medicare for all was part of the Democratic platform until 1980. It got stripped during the Reagan Revolution. So what we're asking for is just going back to what this Democratic Party has stood for since Truman's age, what people have campaigned on for up to 1980. And we can do that, but we're not going to do that unless we continue to build the progressive movement. And I think we're close. Look how close Bernie Sanders came. Look at how much traction Elizabeth Warren got. We need to win. We need a progressive to become our nominee. Once we have a nominee, we can put Medicare for all part of the Democratic platform. Once it's part of the platform, we'll get a vote. But there is no shortcut to it. I mean, the reality is Bernie didn't win. We didn't have a person who carried the Medicare for all banner becoming our nominee. The best way to do it is to make sure that whoever wins the nominations going forward will return to a Medicare for all platform, and then we will have the votes.
So I know that one of the things I think that has been, I think the strategy may not have been clear. In reference to force the vote, the idea was to see who's who, just like with the bill for a $15 minimum wage. It didn't pass in the Senate, but it showed us who's who. Everybody saw those Democrat politicians that voted against it. So people are still angry at Kyrsten Sinema because of that. We need to see that. We need to see who was willing to say, no, we're not going to give everybody health care in this country. So I think there may have been a misunderstanding about the strategy per se.
Yeah, no, although the one way you can tell where people stand is just see who has co-sponsored Bernie Sanders' bill. And in the House is Pramila Jayapal's bill. I think we're up to 120, or around there. I mean, you can see exactly where someone stands. Look, I am for having a vote on it, but I want to ultimately win on it. I want to actually get Medicare for all in this country. And I will tell you, we have no shot of getting Medicare for all unless we get a president who campaigns on Medicare for all and wins and makes that part of the party platform. I voted against, people can look this up, against much criticism from my party. I voted against my party platform in 2020 because it didn't have Medicare for all. People said, oh, I'm voting against the Democratic Party. I was one of the few people in Congress who voted against that platform. But we need a nominee who's going to put Medicare for all in that party platform, and then we'll get all the votes that we need. And we're close. I mean, I know I understand the frustration, because if any time we should have had Medicare for all, it should be in a global pandemic. I get that. But remember how much progress we've made. I mean, look at how strong relatively the Congressional Progressive Caucus is. Now, I know people say it's not strong enough, it didn't negotiate enough, but people didn't even talk about the caucus. At least now we've got a majority of the House supporting Medicare for all. Look how close Bernie Sanders came to being the nominee. We can get this done, and but we won't if people disengage.
But one would argue that it's the big pharmaceutical companies as the reason why a lot of the politicians in DC do not support Medicare for all. And this goes back to a point that I've brought up multiple times on this show. I think corporate money needs to be removed from politics, because it's really not fair. If you have a donor like Blue Cross Blue Shield or Aetna, obviously you're going to vote in their interest. And these are the people that are against it. That's why they don't want us to have Medicare for all, because their donors are the insurance companies. So is there any type of push to get big money out of politics?
Yes, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. That's why we don't have it in California. I mean, Alex Lee and Ash Kalra proposed single payer in California, and even though people ran on it to win, it's not getting through. And part of it, I think, is the big money and influence of big money that was spent in California. We've got to get our governor, our state senate to support it. And the same thing at the federal level. We need to ban big corporations from giving money. I don't take a dime of PAC money and Congress, but we should move much more towards citizens having vouchers where they can spend money on campaigns as opposed to the big private money that currently is dwarfing campaigns.
So I know you reintroduced a bill to implement 18-year term limits for the Supreme Court. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think every president should get 2 appointments, and that people shouldn't be on the court for more than 18 years. That would unstack some of the court. Right now, people talk about packing the court. What we ought to talk about is unpacking the court. McConnell already packed this court. This is a packed court. They should have had Garland on the court. They didn't. They put Gorsuch instead. And then you had justices that lied to the Senate to get on there. Let's have hearings for those justices. Let's unpack the court. Let's have term limits of 18 years. And then let's have every president appoint 2 justices going forward.
Do you think that maybe, because again, I go back to Obama, do you think that RBG should have stepped down?
Well, history is, hindsight is 2020. Of course, in retrospect, she should have. That's why we need these term limits. So the decision shouldn't have been hers. The decision should be people serve for 18 years. And I have great admiration and respect for Justice Ginsburg.
So what happens if, let's say this bill passes in the House, but it doesn't pass in the Senate? What is the backup plan if that happens?
Well, then we're stuck. I mean, the president at least should come out for it. His commission has come out for it, and let's put the Republicans on the defensive. Term limits is a popular idea. 2/3 of the American public support it. One of the things the Republicans did when they overturned Roe versus Wade is they've been fighting for this for 50 years. Relentlessly. And that's one thing we can learn from those of us on the progressive side who want to now see women's rights restored, who want to see Medicare for all, free public college, unions. We have to fight, and we have to realize this is not going to be a fight for a year or 2 years. These are fights that are going to take time, but we've got to be vocal, we've got to be bold, and we've got to fight. And we've got to start somewhere and at least get it voted in the House.
So I have to ask about Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. So they have been blocking a lot of legislation. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think it's just them. I think there may be other people that are, behind the scenes, don't want some of these things to pass either, but it's easier for Manchin and Sinema to be the fall guys and fall women per se. I'm curious. I have not seen them being held accountable. Like, have they been removed from any committee assignments, and why or why not?
Well, we need their votes. I agree with you that the president should get involved in negotiation. I was, several staff members were in Senator Schumer's office saying we can't give up on climate. We've got to negotiate. We've got to resume the negotiations. I agree with that spirit. And my view is that this has got to have the direct intervention of the president at this point. And all options ought to be on the table. But what we have to do is figure out how we get something done.
Why do you think he's not holding them accountable? And I ask this question because it's really disappointing for those of us on the outside when we see something that may have like good potential pass in the House, and then it gets to the Senate, and it's those two that stop it. And some of us are asking, like, why are you even a part of the Democratic Party? At this point, just leave. I feel like they're there on purpose to be roadblocks. And at that point, I felt like there should have been some type of accountability. And I say this because, for example, if you look at the squad, okay, Nina Turner's campaign, second time around this year, they were told not to endorse Nina Turner. And they didn't do it, with the exception of AOC, who did it the night before. I don't see this happening with Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. I feel like nobody's telling them, no, you cannot do something. It seems like to me, they are the ones that have the most power right now.
Well, I would say Kirsten Sinema's case, a lot of people are telling Ruben Gallego and others to run against her in 2024, and I'd be very surprised if she has any support among Democrats to hold on to her primary. And I fully expect a very strong Democratic challenge, and I would be backing that kind of challenge against her if Ruben or others entered the race. Joe Manchin's a different situation because he's representing a state that is 65-70% Donald Trump. But I think where you could get negotiations is with the president to sit down one-on-one, see where we can move and come up with an agreement. And I do think it's going to require the president's personal intervention.
I do feel like there's always a rotating villain. I feel like if it's not Sinema or Manchin, it's the parliamentarian. Under Obama, it was Lieberman. It's clear to me that these individuals, I feel like they're just scapegoats. I feel like the real reason why we're not fighting back or they're not fighting back is because they're answering to their corporate donors. Joe Manchin, for example, has a lot of money in the coal industry. So anything in reference to the environment regulations, he's going to vote against it. I don't understand why he's the chair of an environment organization and he hasn't been removed as chair.
Well, corporate interests in terms of the funding that they provide are a big impediment to progressive policy. But we can get progressive policy through. We got Dodd-Frank through. In the Obama years, the Affordable Care Act. Now I'm for Medicare for all, but Affordable Care Act was better than nothing by far in getting people on health care. We were able to pass the American Rescue Plan with the child tax credit expansion. We got much funding down to the HBCUs. So progress is possible. Now, both you and I want it to be bolder and faster, but the way to do that is to continue to mobilize support for policies that are 60-70% popular and to get some form of campaign finance reform passed. I believe that the Progressive Caucus, Progressive Movement is on the verge of major victories. And what disheartens me is people who say, okay, we want to give up. Hold the Democratic Party accountable. Make the Democrats earn your votes. But, we need people's activism still.
I was reading recently that the majority of Americans want a third party. They want a third party politician. Like I've been done with the duopoly. People are done with it because neither Republicans or Democrats are actually helping the American people. Like we see them helping corporations all the time, but we don't see them helping us.